If you were married to your US citizen spouse as of June 17th, 2024, there is a very good chance that you are eligible for Biden's new parole in place program. Hey guys, Puyan Darian here, an immigration lawyer based out of New York, here to talk to you today about how Biden's new parole in place program affects people who have DACA. And this could be people who've continuously maintained and renewed DACA since they were granted initially, people who've applied for DACA after the court order put a pause on the new application, so you have an application pending but it hasn't been approved, and people who've previously had DACA but lost DACA. We're going to be going through the ins and outs of this, so stay tuned. Let's go through a hypothetical situation. Let's say you currently have DACA. You've maintained it since you were initially granted DACA and you're married to a US citizen. And let's say that you didn't enter the US with a visa. You entered through the border or otherwise without inspection. If you were married to your US citizen spouse as of June 17th, 2024, there is a very good chance that you are eligible for Biden's new parole in place program. And you might be wondering, well, how does that help me? Well, the reason why you haven't been able to apply for permanent residence through your marriage is because you entered the US without inspection. And to be granted permanent residence, you would need to leave the US to go for a consulate interview. But before you leave, you would need to apply for an I-601A waiver. This is to forgive or waive your unlawful presence in the United States, because if you don't apply for that and you go to your interview abroad, you'll be barred from re-entering the US for 10 years. But it's oftentimes difficult to get these waivers approved because to be granted, you need to show that your spouse or parent will suffer extreme hardship if you're not allowed to remain united with them, or you're not allowed back into the US after you attend your consular interview. And this typically means that your spouse or parent will suffer more than a normal spouse or parent who's losing their child or spouse to the deportation process. And for example, if your only qualifying relative is your US citizen spouse, and your US citizen spouse's life is pretty good, they have no severe problems, disabilities, mental health issues, financial hardships, everything's just going great, it's gonna be hard to show that they will suffer more than a normal spouse when they're separated from you. So that's where Biden's parole in place program comes in. If you apply for this, it will fix your unlawful entry. And now that you've entered legally, even though it's a legal fiction, but it'll fix your illegal entry, now you will be eligible to apply for adjustment of status inside the US without ever having to leave and without ever having to apply for the 601A waiver, which means you no longer need to show that your spouse or parent will suffer extreme hardship. This will help a lot of people reduce the risk of leaving the United States to go for a consular interview, and even more people who don't qualify for this unlawful presence waiver because they cannot demonstrate the extreme hardship standard. What about people who've submitted initial DACA applications that are still pending? Well, anyone who previously had DACA who let it expire and failed to renew it for more than 1 year is considered to be submitting an initial application. And anyone who didn't have DACA previously who's applying now would also be submitting an initial application. There's a court order currently in place preventing USCIS from approving initial applications, so if you apply, it'll just remain pending until something changes with the courts. Your application will have no bearing on Biden's new immigration program. As long as you were married to a US citizen on June 17th, 2024, and as of that day, June 17th, 2024, you were in the US for 10 years, and you have no serious criminal history, and you entered the US without authorization or without some sort of visa, you should be eligible for this program. I mean, there are other requirements. For example, you need to merit a favorable exercise of discretion, which just means you need to generally be a good person, but there's no specific reason if you meet these requirements why you wouldn't be eligible to apply for this program. The final situation I want to discuss is people who had DACA previously but no longer have DACA. And it depends on the reason you no longer have DACA. If you just failed to renew it and you waited too long and then that court order went into place treating your new application as an initial application because you waited more than 1 year after it expired, then you can still qualify for this Biden program. But if you lost DACA because of a criminal history, for example, you got a DUI or something more serious, you might not be eligible for this program because one of the requirements is that you not have a significant criminal history. We don't know exactly what that means, but for DACA, the rule was you cannot have more than 3 misdemeanors or 1 significant misdemeanor, and the clear example of a significant misdemeanor is a DUI. A DUI in New York anyway ordinarily wouldn't render you inadmissible or deportable, but it was a deal breaker for DACA applicants. So that's something we're going to be on the lookout for, and I'll make a video on that as soon as we know exactly which types of crimes will render you ineligible for Biden's new parole program. If you're eligible, once we apply for the parole in place, it'll fix your unlawful entry, and then we can apply for permanent residence through your spouse petition. Alright guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you have any questions on this video, post them within 1 week of the video airing in the comments below. I'll try my best to answer everything. If you're interested in these topics and other family-related immigration topics, subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be posting another video on Biden's new program next week as well. So if you have any questions about any of that, let me know. If you need an immigration lawyer to consult with or to handle your case, if you're applying for permanent residence or the parole in place program, naturalization, or any other affirmative immigration benefits, you can contact me, we can do a consultation, and I'll handle your case.